Welcome to Serial Stories, the podcast where we unravel the most chilling, fascinating, and downright unbelievable true crime tales. Each episode, we explore a theme that ties together the darkest corners of human history, where lives intersect with violence, intrigue, and the unthinkable. Join us as we step into a world where truth is stranger than fiction, and every tale leaves you wondering what drives someone to cross the line into the unimaginable. Farmhouse Butchers. The Hinterkaifeck Murders, a farmhouse of secrets. In the remote countryside of Bavaria, Germany, life moved at quite an unhurried pace. In 1922, the Gruber family lived on their isolated farm, Hinterkaifeck, miles away from the nearest village. To the outside world, they seemed like an ordinary family, but behind closed doors, rumors of strange happenings and dark secrets would soon lead to one of the most infamous and chilling unsolved murder mysteries of the 20th century. The Grubers were no strangers to gossip. Andreas Gruber, the patriarch, was known to be a harsh and domineering man. He lived with his wife, Gisela, their widowed daughter, Victoria, and her 2 young children. The family had a reputation for keeping to themselves, which only fueled the speculation about their lives. Locals whispered about abuse, a potential incestuous relationship between Andreas and Victoria, and strange occurrences on the farm. In the weeks leading up to the tragedy, the family reported unsettling events. Andreas found strange footprints in the snow, leading from the nearby woods to the house, but none leading back. Items began disappearing from the property. The family heard footsteps in the attic, though a search revealed nothing. They dismissed the possibility of an intruder, chalking it up to paranoia or mischievous pranksters. But the truth was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. On the evening of March 31st, 1922, an unknown assailant approached the farm. Using a mattock, a farming tool similar to a pickaxe, they attacked each member of the family with brutal precision. Victoria, her daughter Gisela, and Andreas were lured into the barn one by one and killed. The youngest child, 2-year-old Joseph, and the family maid, Maria Baumgartner, were slaughtered inside the farmhouse. What made the crime even more chilling was the killer's actions after the murders. For several days they remained at the farm, feeding the animals, eating the family's food, and maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Smoke was even seen rising from the chimney, and neighbors noted the farm seemed unusually quiet, but alive. Days passed with no word from the Grubers. Concerned neighbors visited the farm on April 4th and made a horrific discovery. Inside the barn, the bodies of Andreas, Victoria, and young Gisela were stacked in a gruesome pile, covered with hay. In the farmhouse, Josef and the maid Maria were found murdered in their bedrooms. The scene was brutal and chaotic. Blood stained the walls, and signs of struggle suggested the victims had fought desperately for their lives. Investigators were shocked to find that young Gisela had survived the initial attack and had torn out clumps of her own hair in anguish before succumbing to her injuries. Despite the intensity of the investigation, the killer was never caught. Theories ranged from vengeful neighbor to a stranger passing through the area. Some even suspected Victoria's estranged lover or her late husband's brother, but no evidence ever conclusively pointed to one person. The lack of resolution only deepened the mystery. Why had the killer stayed in the farm for days? Why had the Grubers ignored the warning signs? And what truly motivated the murders? These questions have haunted investigators and true crime enthusiasts for over a century. In 1923, the Hinterkaifeck farmhouse was demolished, leaving nothing but a vacant patch of land. Yet the story of the Gruber family continues to captivate and terrify. To this day, the case remains unsolved, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide even in the quietest corners of the world. The Hinterkaifeck murder stands as one of Germany's most infamous unsolved crimes. Were they the result of personal vendettas, unspoken family secrets, or the work of a deranged stranger? The truth lies buried with the Grubers, their lives lost to the shadows of the cold Bavarian night. The Villisca Axe Murders, a night of terror in a quiet farm town. The year was 1912, and Villisca, Iowa, was a kind of small farming town where everyone knew each other's name. Nestled amidst the rolling fields and quiet homes, the Moore family lived a seemingly idyllic life. Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, were well loved in the community. That summer, the town was alive with festivities as the local Presbyterian church hosted a Children's Day program. But no one could have foreseen how that night would end, nor the shadow that it would cast over Villisca forever. On June 9th, 1912, was a day of celebration for the Moore family. The children had spent hours rehearsing for church program, which they performed proudly that evening. After the event, 2 young friends, Lena and Ina Stillinger, were invited to stay the night at the Moore's home. It was a happy, ordinary day in the lives of the 8 people who would soon meet a tragic end. That evening, they returned home, unaware that an intruder was already lying in wait. Someone had entered the house, possibly through an unlocked door, and hidden in the attic, biding their time until the family fell asleep. Under the cover of darkness, the intruder attacked. Armed with an axe, they attacked Josiah and Sarah in the bedroom first. The blows were so forceful that the axe left deep gouges in the ceiling above the bed. One by one, the killer moved to the children's rooms, ensuring no one was left alive. Finally, the intruder turned their wrath on the Stillinger sisters, who were sleeping in the guest room. Lena Stillinger showed signs of having been awake during the attack, perhaps realizing what was happening too late to escape. The brutality was shocking. None of the 8 victims stood a chance. When the killing was over, the murderer draped clothing over the mirrors and windows, covering the bodies with sheets, and placed a piece of bacon by the axe, an act as bizarre as it was horrifying. The next morning, neighbors noticed the usually lively Moore house was unnervingly silent. A local man, worried about the family's absence, entered the home and stumbled upon the unimaginable. The entire household had been slaughtered. Word spread quickly, and soon the streets of Villisca were flooded with shocked and grieving residents. Law enforcement arrived, but their investigation was hampered by the chaos. Curious townfolk trampled the crime scene, contaminating evidence and making it nearly impossible to determine exactly what had happened. The Villisca Axe murders sparked a media frenzy and a long list of suspects. One theory pointed to Reverend George Kelly, a traveling minister who had attended the church program that evening. Kelly, a deeply troubled man with a history of erratic behavior, later confessed to the murders but recanted his statement. Despite standing trial twice, he was never convicted. Other suspects included a local businessman with a grudge against Josiah Moore and a potential connection to a string of similar axe murders across the Midwest, but without solid evidence, the case grew cold, leaving Villisca to live with its unanswered questions. Over a century later, the Villisca Axe murders remain unsolved, a dark stain on the town's otherwise peaceful history. The Moore House still stands today, preserved as a macabre tourist attraction where visitors claim to experience ghostly encounters and unexplained phenomena. Was the killer someone the Moores knew? A deranged drifter passing through town? Or a predator who had struck before and would strike again? The Villisca Axe murders left behind more than just grief. It left a mystery that continues to haunt anyone who dares to delve into its gruesome details. Ed Gein, the butcher of Plainfield. In the quiet farming town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, Ed Gein was a man few paid much attention to. He was polite, even shy, and known for doing odd jobs around the community. But beneath the surface of this unassuming farmer lay a darkness so profound that it would shock the nation and inspire some of the most terrifying villains in popular culture. Ed Gein's farmhouse wasn't just his home. It was a stage for horrors that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. Born in 1906, Ed Gein grew up under the oppressive influence of his mother, Augusta, a fanatically religious woman who viewed the world as wicked and sinful. She isolated Ed and his older brother, Henry, on their family farm, forbidding them from forming any relationships outside of their immediate family. Augusta filled their heads with fire and brimstone sermons, preaching that all women except herself were instruments of the devil. When Augusta died in 1945, Ed's world crumbled. He was utterly lost without her domineering presence and retreated further into isolation. Alone in their farmhouse, surrounded by the fields and woods of Plainfield, Ed's mind began to unravel. For years, Plainfield residents thought of Ed as an odd but harmless recluse. He kept to himself, living in a house that seemed to decay alongside his sanity. But in 1957, the disappearance of Bernice Warden, a local hardware store owner, led police to Gein's farm. What they found inside was beyond their darkest imaginings. The farmhouse was a macabre shrine to the death. Skulls were mounted like trophies. Human skin was fashioned into lampshades and clothing, and furniture was upholstered with flesh. The remains of at least 15 women were found, though many of these body parts were stolen from graves. Gein later admitted to robbing cemeteries and using the bodies to create a woman's suit in an attempt to become his mother. Though most of Gein's horrors came from grave robbing, he confessed to murdering 2 women, Mary Hogan, a local tavern owner, and Bernice Warden. Gein's calm confession chilled investigators. He described killing Warden with the same detachment one might use to recount a trip to the grocery store. Gein was declared legally insane and spent the rest of his life in a mental institution. He died in 1984, but the infamy of his crimes endures. His twisted deeds inspired some of the most iconic horror characters in history, including Norman Bates in Psycho, Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. The farmhouse was eventually burned to the ground, likely by locals who couldn't bear the thought of it standing as a grotesque landmark. But the story of Ed Gein still casts a long shadow over Plainfield. How could a man so unassuming commit such unspeakable acts? Was it the result of his abusive upbringing, his isolation, or something far darker within his soul? Ed Gein wasn't just a murderer. He was a symbol of how the quietest corners of rural America can hide unimaginable horrors. The Butcher of Plainfield reminds us that sometimes evil doesn't look like a monster. It looks like your neighbor. The Farmville Murders, a modern tragedy on a rural farm. In 2009, Farmville, Virginia was a small, quiet town where life moved slowly. Surrounded by sprawling farmlands and rolling hills, it was the kind of place where nothing truly bad ever happened until the arrival of a young man named Richard McCrowski. Over the span of a few days, McCrowski turned the peaceful farmhouse into a scene of unspeakable horror, leaving 4 people dead and a community shattered. Richard McCrowski was not your typical 20-year-old. Known online as Psycho Sam, he was part of the underground horrorcore music scene, a subgenre of rap with violent and dark lyrics. McCrowski's songs often spoke of murder and revenge, but for those who knew him in real life, he was quiet and unassuming. That summer, McCrowski struck up a relationship online with 16-year-old Emma Niederbrock, who shared his love of horrorcore music. After months of virtual communication, McCrowski traveled from his home in California to Virginia to visit Emma and her family. What started as an exciting meetup quickly spiraled into one of the most shocking crimes the small town had ever seen. Emma, her best friend Melanie Wells, and Emma's parents, Deborah Kelly and Mark Niederbrock, attended a horrorcore music festival together in Michigan shortly before their murders. Though the festival seemed like a bonding experience, tensions quickly emerged. Emma was reportedly losing interest in McCrowski, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere as they all returned to the family's rural farmhouse in Farmville. What exactly caused Mikrowski to snap still remains unclear. Perhaps it was rejection, jealousy, or a combination of both. But on September 15, 2009, he unleashed a level of violence that shocked even seasoned investigators. Armed with a wood-splitting maul, Mikrowski attacked the family in their sleep. First, he killed Emma and her friend Milani, bludgeoning them to death in their beds. He then turned on Emma's mother, Deborah, and then waited hours for Mark Niederbrook, Emma's father, to return home before murdering him as well. For several days, Mikrowski remained in the house, surrounded by the bodies of his victims. He used the family's computer, ate their food, and even slept next to the corpses. Friends and family concerned about the silence from the Niederbrook household attempted to contact them, unaware of the horror that had unfolded inside. It wasn't until September 18th, when police conducted a welfare check on the farmhouse, that the gruesome truth came to light. Inside, officers found the bodies of all 4 victims. Mikrowski, who had already fled the scene, was arrested the following day at an airport trying to board a flight back to California. His calm demeanor during his capture was chilling. Mikrowski later confessed to the murders, showing little remorse for his actions. Mikrowski pleaded guilty to the murders and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The farmhouse murders left the small farming community grappling with the realization that such horrific crime could occur in their quiet town. It also brought attention to the darker corners of the internet subcultures, sparking debates about the influence of violent music on online personas. The story of Richard Mikrowski serves as a haunting reminder that evil can hide behind a screen, and within seemingly ordinary people. What began as an innocent online friendship ended up in a tragedy that no one could have anticipated. The Borden Murders, a farmhouse of death and mystery. The summer of 1892 in Fall River, Massachusetts was sweltering, and the Borden household was tense. Andrew Borden, a wealthy but miserly man, lived with his second wife, Abby, and his 2 daughters, Lizzie and Emma, in a modest house despite his considerable fortune. Their home, while not technically on a farm, was part of a larger estate that connected the family to their farming roots. What unfolded inside the house would shock the nation and become one of America's most infamous murder mysteries. Andrew Borden was a man of frugality and strict discipline. Though wealthy, he refused to spend money on luxuries like indoor plumbing or electricity, much to the frustration of his daughters. Lizzie Borden, 32, and her older sister Emma, 41, resented their father's tight grip on the family's finances and his marriage to Abby, whom they viewed as a usurper to their late mother's place. Tensions simmered within the home, compounded by rumors of arguments over inheritance. Lizzie, described by neighbors as polite but distant, had grown increasingly estranged from her stepmother. By August 4th, 1892, the pressure inside the Borden household had reached a breaking point. That morning began like any other. Andrew left for his usual walk, while Abby stayed upstairs making the beds. Bridget Sullivan, the family maid, was outside washing windows under Lizzie's direction. By late morning, the peace was shattered. Abby Borden was the first to die, struck multiple times with a hatchet while in the guest bedroom. The attack was brutal. Her skull was fractured beyond recognition. Shortly after, Andrew returned home and lay down on the sofa for a nap. He too was attacked, receiving 10 blows to the head with the same weapon. Lizzie was the only one home at the time. She later claimed to have been in the barn looking for tools, but her calm demeanor as she called for help raised suspicions. The murder weapon, a blood-stained hatchet, was found in the basement. Lizzie's behavior during questioning only deepened investigators' doubts. She changed her story multiple times and was reportedly seen burning a dress shortly after the murders, claiming it was stained with paint. Lizzie was arrested and charged with the murders, becoming the focus of national attention. Her trial in 1893 captivated the public, with newspapers dubbing her a cold-blooded killer, and others defending her as a wrongly accused woman. The evidence against Lizzie was largely circumstantial. There was no witnesses, and no one could explain her motive beyond financial gain and familial resentment. To the surprise of many, Lizzie was acquitted. The jury was unwilling to believe that a woman of her stature and demeanor could commit such a gruesome crime. Lizzie inherited a significant portion of her father's wealth and moved to a grander home, but she remained a social pariah for the rest of her life. Theories about the Borden murders abound. Some believe Lizzie was guilty but clever enough to evade justice. Others suggest Bridget, the maid, or even a disgruntled outsider could have committed the crime. The truth remains elusive. The Borden house still stands today, preserved as a museum and bed and breakfast. Visitors report eerie experiences, claiming the spirits of Andrew and Abby linger within the walls. But whether haunted or not, the home is a stark reminder of one of America's most infamous unsolved mysteries. Lizzie Borden's name has become synonymous with axe murders. Her story immortalized in a rhyme. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. The reality may never be as simple as the nursery rhyme, but the Borden murders continue to captivate those who dare explore the darker sides of human nature.